we know that this was a weapon assigned to the RIC. At some point during the War of Independence, it was taken in an action because you can see that it has been engraved with the 3 letters IRA. The original hue and cry that was published looking for James Stephens. So it's 20th of March 1868. These are typical firearms that would have came into Ireland during the War of Independence. And if you look on the top of it there, it says British Constabulary. This one is about 1848, and this flag here, this colours here, is from 1881. Then Hugh Tudor and Churchill decide we need an either stronger force than the Black and Tans. So they created the Auxiliary Division of the RIC. They're all retired officers. Yeah. Now you're coming in with discipline. And they understood what they needed to develop the counter-insurgency tactics they needed, which were going to be burn them out. If one of our members are killed, burn a village. That's a Peter's painter. You can put this onto here and turn it into a carbine. And this here butter dish, that's the butter dish that Peter de Lucre brought back from Lincoln jail. Is the butter dish that was used to fashion the impression to finally adjust the key that got Dave out of Lincoln jail. Ernie O'Malley is arrested in O'Halloran's farmyard down in Inistioge. Ernie spends 2 weeks in our jail over here. And so if you're looking for an original GAA style medal, that's the earliest one we have. But this here is the original twin brother of the Lee McCarthy Cup. Okay, so of the 4 rifles here, or of the 4 long arm rifles we have here at the bottom, we have a Lee Medford weapon which would have been from the 1880s on. We know that this was a weapon assigned to the RIC, and at some point during the War of Independence it was taken in an action because the identification disc on the butt is removed, and you can see that it has been engraved with the 3 letters IRA. So that's a very significant weapon of unknown origin, but our source, we don't know what action it came from, but it was definitely changed sides during the War of Independence, put it that way to you. Okay. The blunderbuss is just a weapon from the 1800s. It's made in Dublin in the year 1800, assayed in 1801, and probably used by a ship's captain, as that type of weapon was more likely to be on a ship than on land. They did find their way on land, but it wouldn't normally have been a land-borne weapon. Just as a slight bit of interest here, here's 2 side panels from the NCO's mess fireplace from Queen Victoria's reign. So sometime between 1836 and 1901, those were installed in the barracks. The original hue and cry that was published looking for James Stephens. So it's the 20th of March 1868. So as if it's okay to you, I'm going to read the description of James Stephens, because you will get a very good visual representation in your head when you hear how the RIC describe him. So Dublin, Friday, March 20th, 1868, a proclamation. Whereas James Stephens has been an active member of a treasonable conspiracy against the Queen's authority in Ireland and escaped from Richmond prison on the 24th day of November last, now we being determined to bring the said James Stephens to justice, do hereby offer a reward of £1,000 to any person who shall give such information that shall lead to the arrest of the said James Stephens. His description: James Stephens is almost 42 years of age, 5'7" high, stout make, broad high shoulders, very tight active appearance, fair hair, bald all around the top of the head. He wore all his beard, which is sandy, slightly tinged with grey, rather long under the chin, but slight around the jaw, surrounding the ears, approaching the ears. Broad forehead, tender eyes, which defect seems to be constitutional, and has a particular habit of closing his left eye while speaking. He has high cheekbones and rather good-looking countenance. Hands and feet are remarkably small and well-formed, and he is generally dressed in black clothes. Now,
so that's 1868.
Yes.
So that's after the 67 Fenian Rising.
Yes.
And James Stephens wouldn't have even been head of the IRB at this point.
No, but he was a person of interest because they're offering £1,000 for his capture. Okay. And they had him in custody. He escaped. So a lot of this story, you know, we lose a lot of this history through not being written down, but the hue and cry police gazettes are very good at snippets of historical importance, particularly locally here to Kilkenny, because James Stephens, Black Mill Street, you know, as you know yourself, you've spoke about them in detail. But that is a very nice piece to have.
Okay, that's incredible. I've never seen this before.
You get some picture of them from the...
So here we're moving down. This is what a Kilkenny militia uniform would have looked like from sort of like even 1801 up until... the Kilkenny militia were founded with all the militia in Ireland in 1793. They always wore a red tunic, but their facings were yellow. This is a mock-up that we've done here, just to show what a Kilkenny militia uniform would have looked like. The Busby hat would have been worn by him post. Now the buttons are not, they're a Fusilier button, but they're not Kilkenny Fusilier button. But the hat is an original Kilkenny Fusilier cap, worn by the officers of the regiment. Here you see a nice group of militia cap badges. We have one Kilkenny militia cap badge which is on display over in another display unit. These are typical firearms that would have came into Ireland during the War of Independence. This is a 32 caliber Bulldog revolver, made in Belgium, most of them. They were imported. Okay, Tom Tracy went on hunger strike in, I'm going to say 1920. He ended up being brought to Cork, where they were put on a ship, and they were all brought to Belfast, where they were very badly treated, and they went on hunger strike for 12 days. The hunger strike ended. He was moved to London to a hospital to recover.
Okay.
During his recuperation period, he was allowed outside to go for walks to get fresh air and that. During that time, he became acquainted with a couple of Kilkenny active people. Their names are in his witness statement. I can't think of them right now. And at that time, he came up with the plan to get weapons bought in the east end of London on the docks and posted to the post office in Kilkenny. So about 40 firearms were posted from London within bolts of cloth, and they were delivered to Kilkenny. His wife at that time, Tom had forfeited his very good job in the probate office in Kilkenny City, where he worked for Mr. Poey, because he was the commander and arrested in 1916. After that, himself and his wife opened a drapery store on Parliament Street. All this cloth was going to Parliament Street. So as the bolts of clothing were brought in, these weapons were being brought into active service in the IRA locally.
Wow, okay.
That's one.
And that's called a Bulldog, is it?
We call it a Bulldog style revolver.
Okay.
This is a very important one. This is a 38 caliber used by the IRA locally as well. British Constabulary Bulldog, and if you look on the top of it there, it says British Constabulary. So again, that would have been lifted off an RIC constable or taken in an action off a... We know there was 5 RIC men killed in Kilkenny. Who's to say this? I don't know. Nobody will ever know. But this is a 38 caliber. So this is a larger caliber, much more effective. The IRA couldn't buy these so easily because they were harder to get. The 32 caliber were quite easy, and you can see there's a difference in their size. These were mostly used as what we call hideaways or second firearms by an active serviceman. You would either have your full-size Webley or you might have a 303 rifle. So these are all the colours of the Kilkenny Militia. These are the oldest ones. These are dated from 1801. So these are the Kilkenny Militia colours that were carried by the regiment. Look at, we call them, as everybody say, people come and say, oh, it's the Union Jack. It's actually the regimental colours of the Kilkenny Militia, which the King's colours part of it are represented by the Union flag. And we know that the diagonal cross of St. Patrick was only superimposed onto the flag after the Act of Union in 1801. It took us till 1922 to get our own flag recognised. And you'll notice here, the highest flag in precedence is given to the tricolour. And that tricolour flew in a place called Camp Able in Afghanistan. And it was brought back here by Sergeant Major, CS retired Greg Waters, when he retired from the Defence Forces. So we give precedence to obviously our own national flag, but we have to honour all the Kilkenny men and women who were representative of Kilkenny in whatever form of military, uniform or unit they were in. They're all important to us here, their history and heritage. This one is about 1848, and this flag here, this colours here, is from 1881. when the Kilkenny Militia were redesignated as the 5th Militia Battalion of the Royal Irish Regiment. That's their colours from that time. So then we also have our, this is one of the flags that were flown, not this very flag, but you know, the Irish Republic flag.
Yeah.
And this one here was made in 2016 for the centenary of our centenary events. So we were lucky to get that given to us here. This was carried in 2016 on our centenary parade. So Irish Republic, and we've a mock-up here of what an IRA active service member might look like.
Yeah.
No uniform. The British had just finished fighting what we would call a conventional war in World War One. They fought each other, and they knew who a German was. He wore a uniform. But by January 1919, when our War of Independence started, they did not know how. They were incapable of developing tactics to counteract insurgency warfare, because this was the first insurgency war that they ever had to fight. Their insurgency, their local population, because what they had was a civil war in Great Britain, because Ireland technically was in Great Britain.
Yeah.
So they couldn't admit they had a war at home. So they didn't up the police or the army forces in Ireland at the start in any event. So the first thing they done was they increased the membership of the RIC. They couldn't do that in Ireland because lots of the guys were leaving the RIC.
Exactly.
So they brought in
reinforcements.
The RIC Special Reserve, which quickly became known as the Black and Tans. And they weren't incapable. They weren't able, because they weren't supervised, they weren't managed, they weren't led. They were ex-soldiers. They needed corporals, they needed sergeants, they needed lieutenants, they needed command structure. They got nothing. They got 10 shillings a day. Didn't know what to do with their money. So they drank it, and it became belligerent, and they were on. Shall we see what happens with the Black and Tans during our history? Then Hugh Tudor and Churchill decide we need an either stronger force than the Black and Tans. So they created the auxiliary division of the RIC. They're all retired officers. Yeah. Now you're coming in with discipline. You're coming in with I hate to say better educated, but better tactical knowledge. These guys had all been pilots or naval officers or infantry officers or artillery officers in the Great War. Yeah. So they understood warfighting conventionally, and they understood what they needed to develop the counterinsurgency tactics they needed, which were going to be burn them out. If one of our members are killed, burn a village. Let's do it to, Tullamore, Templemore, where Cork, Limerick. That was a tactic that was developed by the auxiliary division with the Crown forces here in Ireland, and that then led to the war getting really as harsh as it got. But it was only after a while that tactic wasn't having the effect it needed either, so then the British Army were pushed back in. It wasn't until like a month before the end of the war that Lord Birkenhead admitted in Westminster there's a small war going on in Ireland.
Yeah.
There was the inability, and thankfully, look, our guys done a great job. They defeated the Crown forces, because even though we ended up with a negotiated treaty, in my opinion, the IRA defeated the Crown forces in Ireland. They couldn't defeat them. It was technically 1-1 draw, maybe, but in essence, we proved we could defeat an empire. That's it. They couldn't defeat. It was undefeatable, and that's And then all those auxiliaries, the guys, most of them, their next policing job was Palestine. What's going on in Palestine now? And these are all weapons from the War of Independence, and these all come from local sources. So you're looking at a long barrel Luger at the back.
Is that the Peter the Painter,
no,
they call it?
This is a replica Peter the Painter.
Okay.
This is the Mauser.
Oh, it's a bigger yoke altogether.
Well, it had the opportunity to be bigger. That's a Peter the Painter.
Okay.
You could actually, if you took out the holster, which I'm not going to, the lads have taped in there, you can put this onto here and turn it into a carbine. But this is how the IRA mostly used it. This is a sort of short barrel Luger, much loved by the IRA. This is a Webley Mark 6. This is actually the Webley belonging to George the Wire. all handwritten notes by a lieutenant out in E Company in the 7th Battalion, the IRA. You can see there he's looking for this is a real nice notebook to have, because the IRA didn't take notes, they didn't keep records, because if you're caught, it's evidence to use against you. And in there you can see that there is the 7th Battalion, E Company, 7th Battalion, IRA, the 19th to the 10th, 1921, Acora. As you are one of the men appointed for scouting and dispatches, you are hereby required to be at Gary Ricken on tomorrow, Thursday, at 3 p.m. You have to bring dispatches from here to brigade headquarters. So that's just a really authentic primary source note. These two caltrops here were made by a Lieutenant Fogarty out in Castlecomer, and they were used to burst the tyres in black and tan lorries, as they would say.
Okay, right.
You just threw them on the road, and no matter how they landed, they were going to land point up, so that you had a good chance of... And this here butter dish, that's the butter dish that Peter DeLucre bought back from Lincoln Jail.
Oh, no way.
That is the butter dish that was used to fashion the impression to finally adjust the key that got Dave out of Lincoln Jail.
No way, right.
In 1919. So Peter DeLucre, his sister Winifred, married a guy called Henry Mangan, and their descendant became Chief of Staff of the Irish Defence Forces, Colin Mangan. And when Colin Mangan retired from the Defence Forces on his last day, he donated his uniform to us and the butter dish from his grandfather. But one thing the IRA did extremely well in Kilkenny, and people say, Kilkenny wasn't that active in the War of Independence. It was very active. What they achieved in Kilkenny, beyond doubt, was to deny freedom of movement to the RIC.
Yeah.
They couldn't move anywhere, unless they were company size or platoon size patrols. And then the IRA knew they were moving. That's why there were a lot less ambushes by the RIC successful in County Kilkenny, because the lads knew when they were leaving Kilkenny or Comer or Callan, because after the Hugginstown attack, all the little RIC barracks were closed. Then they were destroyed at Easter, the following Easter, and so they couldn't be reoccupied. So the RIC had to cluster in bigger areas. So they lost their eyes and ears on the ground, and then they lost the capability of movement in small units. So the IRA really defeated them locally without achieving the large casualty rate on both sides that were achieved in other counties. And the topography in Kilkenny is not good for ambushes.
Yeah.
It's very arable. Yeah. There were crops in the ground from April to November, so there was nowhere to hide.
Yeah.
The corn would grow, but you could see where people were going in corn, and farmers, you couldn't damage farmers' crops. Whereas, so you have mountainous areas in Kilkenny are restricted to Coon, sort of Muckalee. Now these are just higher ground areas, and then you have Graignamanagh. And then where Canby was very active was the joining of 7th Battalion Kilkenny with Tipperary. That Mullinahone, that sort of area there is broken enough ground as well. So you could move, freedom of movement, and in those areas the IRA had safe houses. They could stay safely. And they could be the local, so if you had your flying columns, the number 1 flying column, which was led and worked out with Graignamanagh, their most important attack, I suppose, was up just outside Castlecomer there, Coolbawn, right? They wintered, or they stayed in always in number 5 battalion's area down in Graignamanagh. So they had a long trek. Twice they did that to get up and down to there. The first time they tripped an ambush called the Uskerty ambush, which didn't kill anybody but was a successful IRA action. And the 7th Battalion Flying Column operated in the West Kilkenny Tipperary area, where there was equally a lot of ground, and then down around Sinnott's Cross and that action could happen because, you know, that was close to the end of the war, but there was that bit of broken ground area down there where you could extract yourself to.
Yeah.
But like Kilkenny City, like the guy's Friary Street was going to fail from the start.
Yeah.
There just was nowhere to go. It was in concept very good. They could have killed the 7 soldiers that day, but their rules of engagement were don't fire, lads. We want to disarm these guys, and that went belly up straight away. And then the British soldiers at the back of the ration wagon, just fired down Friary Street, killed two, mortally wounded the two IRA men and killed Thomas Dullard, who died as well. Why? Because they were all channeled into one little narrow street. There's nowhere to go.
Yeah, it's lethal.
You know, lethal. Yeah. Anyway, so there you go. This is Hannah Murphy, the leader of Coming Them On throughout the War of Independence and Civil War, actually. She stood true to the Republic side as such. Then the three brigade commanders of the IRA in Kilkenny, you have Tom Tracy, Peter DeLucre and George Dwyer. George had been a metropolitan policeman in Dublin, had emigrated to New Zealand, came home on the death of his father, I believe, and then he took up a position in the number 3 battalion, the 3rd battalion of the IRA, Castlecorner battalion, and he eventually would be appointed as the brigade commander after Peter DeLucre is arrested, after Bernard Stewart, Ernie O'Malley, is arrested in O'Halloran's farmyard down in Inistioge.
Yeah.
Ernie spends 2 weeks in our jail over here. In the prison where we're going next.
All right, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's never found out though. He's always Bernard Stewart. He's never Ernie O'Malley. The Black and Tans or the Crown Forces did not know who they had arrested.
Because he was given the fake name.
Yeah, Bernard. Yeah, Bernard Stewart. So these are two original War of Independence medals for. Well, it's not the 1916 medal. That's a different medal, but with Cormac Bar. So they were awarded with combat. These pair here belong to Mr. Martin Brennan from Dunmore in Kilkenny. So that's his service medal and his 50th anniversary survivors medal. And we're lucky to have his original torch that he used on his bicycle back in the day for signalling and other activities, so we're told. And here then you have a very nice cert issued to Patrick Parsons. Patrick Parsons was one of the 32 guys arrested after 1916 here in Kilkenny. And this is his discharge, certificate of service. So here you see a certificate awarded to Patrick Parsons. So these were probably awarded to all the Kilkenny men who were actively involved in the War of Independence. But here you'll see, this one is dated from June 14 to July 21. And already you will see, is issued on behalf of Shan Oigle Nahir and Kilkenny, old IRA. Now, that was to differentiate the split that happened in 22 for the Civil War. They were already calling themselves old IRA to differentiate there at that stage. So I can take that out and let you have a picture of that as well if you like.
That'd be great, yeah, absolutely.
The reason that his survived was it was taped onto the back of some unknown person's wedding photograph. You know? So it survived, like, and there obviously were hundreds of these printed, but how many of them survived? That's the first lady that worked in the barracks, Miss Anna Murray. She was a shorthand typist here, and unfortunately she had a job here from when the National Army took over in 22 until her job was made defunct in 1928. So she's the first civilian lady employee in the barracks. Michael Collins, and these are a box of ammunition from the Odd.
Oh wow, okay.
It's Mauser ammunition, or Moss and Nagant ammunition maybe. You can still see the barnacles on the top of the leather hooch. I can take it out, but we won't touch it if we can avoid it.
Right.
So occasionally official dives happen onto the Odd. There you go. You can see the ammunition clips still at the back there. See there? That was compartmentalised between the different the rounds.
So that's probably what Mossy Nagant ammunition?
Yeah, Moss and Nagant or Mauser. You see, most of the weapons that came over were actually Moss and Nagants because they were Russian rifles taken from Russian POWs. Because they didn't want to give away Mausers because they were actively fighting the Brits. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
At the time. So, but this here is the Moss and Nagant. That Moss and Nagant is slightly, there's a story behind this one too, because this one was made in Springfield, America for the Russian army in 1916-17. It's dated 1917, but the reason these did not make it to Russia was because the Tsar was dethroned and they had a civil war. So the Russian, this consignment of rifles never made it to their point where they were ordered from, but instead somehow lots of them ended up in Ireland and in the hands of the IRA. So that's one of those. This here is a German Mauser from World War I. Some of these may have came in. This is a Mauser from the Boer War. This is a German GU from 1877 or 1887, I think. And that was just a prototype rifle that didn't really make it into service, but would have made it to Ireland. And this here is an Italian Variety rifle, of which 100 of these were bought by MP O'Brien. He was the Member of Parliament, I can't remember his first name. He was the Member of Parliament for Kilkenny constituency. In 1914 he bought 100 of these for the Irish Volunteers. And if you see the video clip, the Pate film of them being handed out in the Market Square in Kilkenny, I have the video clip. They're very obvious, these weapons, except they had a long bayonet, which we don't have the bayonet for this one. This is probably one of the original 100. But the problem was he never bought ammunition. So from day one, they were useless. So, World War I, uniform belonging to 2nd Lieutenant Keneally from Patrick Street, Royal Irish Regiment officer. He died of pneumonia before he could go to France. He's buried in Foulkstown Cemetery with a World War I headstone. Because I'm going over to Flanders on the 18th of October to lay a wreath on the 20th, which is the anniversary of the Battle of Lepilly, the 110th anniversary. But while researching Le Torre Cemetery yesterday, I've discovered with my other researcher that there's probably now, I can't definitively say it, a 13-year-old boy from Coolcullen in Castlecomer who died with the Irish Guards there in 1915. Because we can't, his date of birth is, he's not in the 1901 census, and in 1911 he's 8. Okay. So if this is proven, he will be the youngest known serviceman to die from the British forces in World War I. Right now it's another Kilkenny boy from Callan, and his name is Thomas Woodgate, and he died after a German U-boat attack on his, while the ship he was on, the SS Leinster, was on its way to the UK, where he was going to start training as an apprentice mechanic with the Royal Air Force. He was 14. These things just pop up. Just very interestingly over here, when myself and Jim O'Keefe were renovating the floor here, we didn't paint it, but we sanded it back. This used to be an old store for spare parts for vehicles. But underneath one of these two pieces of flooring, we found these 9 coins. The oldest one is 1798, the youngest one is 1822. So somebody was saving a few bob. Yeah. And forgot to either bring it with him, or he was moved without getting a chance to collect them, or we'll never know. One of them is actually, if you look at the one in the middle, it actually has the harp in it. It's a pre-active Union Irish coin.
Wow, right, that's unreal.
Yeah, so this is the first year the Irish Army held its All-Army. So this is the very first year that there were medals awarded, and this was a medal awarded for handball, and he was J.J. Bergen, and that's it's 25, is it? No, 23.
23,
yeah. And so if you're looking for an original GAA style medal, that's the earliest one we have. It has the crest of the Defence Forces in the middle. But this here is the original twin brother of the Liam McCarthy Cup. Except this one was designed and played for first in 1923. The Liam McCarthy has changed a number of times because it got worn and filled with whiskey a few times, I'd say. But this one, it's on display here because it's won by the 3rd Battalion that often. They play it comes out with the cover once a year to go to the final. And this is the Inter-Brigade trophy, I think, isn't it?
I think it is, yeah.
So I'll take it out and let you hold it now, Dave, if you like as well.
Yeah, that'd be great, yeah.
Yeah, and you'll see dates on that now. The ones that are out are very modern. I'll go back to the. Sorry, I'll hold. See if you want to get the print on it there in Irish first. Yeah, you can see in 1923 was won by the Limerick Command.
Jeez, that's amazing. That's unreal.
Now, so that's early GA, because at the very start, you know, the foundation of the Irish Defence Forces and the foundation of the Irish state were the same thing. So really at the start, the GA was embedded in our DNA as soldiers.
Do you know when that's from?
Well, it's a replica of an early hurl, but it was one of the lads got it made here by
Nari, is it?
Yeah, I think it's Nari. Yeah. But I think it would be a good idea to get a batch of them made of the old style to let kids experience what hurling was like back in the day.
A lot trickier with that.
Yeah. So that's in here. I'll just show you, like, this is the funeral of John F. Kennedy. He died in 1963, as we all know. And in the spring and summer of whenever he was here in 63, the cadets had been present at all the ceremonial events. And his wife, Jacqueline, was so impressed. And he must have said something to her, because nobody expected him to be assassinated in 1963. But at his funeral, they were not American soldiers that had the centre point. They were the Irish cadets. And that's them there in their uniform. And the commander of the cadets that day would become later Brigadier General Frank Coakley. And Frank lives in Kilkenny all his life. I'm not sure if he's from Kilkenny, and his two sons are lieutenant colonels in the army somewhere now, or maybe approaching the rank of colonel. And there we have a 2014 All-Star Award, awarded on Captain Paul Murphy. So he is down on display here in the museum as well, because Paul is obviously extremely proud of his GA heritage and how that helped him. The army don't pay you to win medals, but it certainly encourages recruitment and new people to join, because like, you cannot have a more authentic lifestyle than as a soldier in the Irish Defence Forces. And I say that as a person with 36 years service with no skin in the game anymore. But you come in and you're encouraged to be fit, stay fit, play every sport possible.
Yeah.
If you're good enough, you'll go international. And if you're not good enough, you get all the time in the world to do it, because we need fit people. That's it. So that's probably giving you the history of the barracks. This actual part here is the latter build. This is IJK block, and would become the stables on the bottom for the horses, and upstairs for the artillery soldiers. And those, see the rounded doorways? They were the storage positions for the artillery guns. So there were 6 artillery pieces here, so 1 battery of artillery was stationed here from the late 1800s up until almost 1922. It's saying that the regiment that were here when they did actually send a lot more British soldiers into Ireland towards the end of the War of Independence was the Devonshire Regiment. So that if you see a reference to a British soldier, they're either artillery or Devonshire Regiment from here. This here is the old armourer's store for the artillery pieces. You'll see the little stones outside are set in such a way that horses won't slip on them. And inside this arch here, where the artillery gun would go to get repaired, inside there, they're like black tiles, but they're not tiles at all. They're black cubes of timber. So no sparks. If you had a spark in there, boom, it'd blow up. And this here is the Skittle Hall, which is alongside the prison. And the prison is where we're going to go next. So on the 13th of October 1922, the IRA, the anti-treaty forces, conducted a raid on Sheestown House. It was officially authorised. It was a raid conducted in order to procure arms, ammunition, and I suppose money, anything else they could get from the residents at the time. They escaped, having raided the house, and on the 13th of December 1922, there was a raid by the National Forces done in Bishop's Lock, out near Bennis Bridge. And during that raid, 2 Murphy brothers, John and his brother, and John Phelan from Thomastown, were arrested. One of the brothers was released. I think it was Patrick Murphy, and John Murphy and John Phelan were alleged to have been found in possession of illegal arms and ammunitions taken in Sheestown House, but also contravening the Emergency Power Act, which had been initiated. They were court-martialed inside here, found guilty, and on the 29th of December their executions were carried out in the backyard, the exercise yard of the prison. And we're going to go in now and I'll tell you the story surrounding all that now. Is that
Perfect. Yeah, perfect.
So we've brought this back to its original as much as we can, with the exception of storage heaters and fire extinguishers. So the end of October this year is the 100th anniversary of the repatriation of the bodies to the families. And Jim O'Keefe, who is the curator here in the barracks now, also does some part-time work in military archives. And Jim has had access to the original documents, said the letter that was sent by the National Army, the civil authorities, to the families, requesting them to send a letter asking for the remains of their next of kin back. And that all happened around this time, 100 years ago. And at the end of October, we'll be commemorating the 100th anniversary of the exhuming and reinterring of John Murphy and John Phelan out in St. Mary's Cemetery in Thomastown. They're both buried there, up on the hill. So it's probably the full stop at the end of our participation in the reflection and commemoration on active events that happened a century ago. Even though our decade of centenaries is over, this is a legacy event that needs to get equal importance and prominence, because for those families, they couldn't claim pensions or were given no assistance really by the state until 1932 when the government changed, and that allowed them then to claim. Mrs. Phelan got a pension for life, but Mrs. Murphy, because she was mother of, not wife of, got an award of money, a grant, and that was it. So if this prison was downtown, it would definitely be a tourist attraction. Mind your head, please. Not the freshest smelling room. This is the guard room, and probably the area where the court martials were held. They wouldn't have taken him out of the prison, probably. So the furniture is all old. Some of it is unique to the barracks, like this writing area. There would have been an officer up here, so he would have had a space something like this. And there would have been an NCO and probably 3 or 4 privates. This here is actually a World War II bicycle, out of context here, but it is the best condition bicycle. See the black back bracket for your 303 rifle. And if I ring the bell, it sounds sweet. It's still here. So anyway, during the court martials, the legal officer was a fellow called Commandant Joseph Mooney. His 2IC was Staff Captain Lidwell. And Frederick Lidwell's father was a solicitor in Dublin, and who had recently died. But you'll see his father mentioned in the book Ulysses, because he was a contemporary of James Joyce, and at one stage he gave him some financial or legal advice, which Joyce wasn't too happy with. So he gets a mention or two in Ulysses. But Staff Captain Lidwell was, get the date right, the 22nd of December 1922. He was part of a group that were in the orderly room in the officers' mess, which is now where the officers' mess is now. And the assistant adjutant, Captain Murphy, called for the orderly room to be cleared. Get out, everybody. There's too many people in here. So then he called out the guard, Captain Murphy did, which is a bad thing to do, really. And the guard came over, because the guard room was literally across the road then, across the yard, not the road even. And 2 privates came in to clear the orderly room, and one of the privates cocked his rifle. He was a private soldier from Callan, a retired British Army soldier from World War I. And nobody said, "Whoa, stop, stop, stop." things carried on. And as he was ushering guys or pushing guys out of the order room, the cuff of his jacket got caught in the door handle, caused him to pull the trigger on the rifle, and he shot Captain Lidwell dead. So Captain Lidwell dies on the 22nd of December 1922 from an accidental discharge of a firearm. The private was exonerated in the subsequent court of inquiry, but Assistant Adjutant Murphy was eviscerated for not using due care and attention, just getting his order room emptied. I mean, an order room, like, there was a fire in there, there was a kettle probably, lads were cold, there was 5 or 6 guys in there, they weren't all in uniform, but at that time Commandant Mooney was appointing the board for the court-martial.
Okay.
So all this stuff was going on at the same time. Anyway, the guys are court-martialed, they're found guilty, the reports are sent to Dublin for review by the Judge Advocate General, who's a fellow called Cahir Davitt, a descendant of Michael Davitt, and he would go on to be the President of the High Court in Ireland, or at least the Circuit Court in Ireland. And he reviews the documentation. He advises that there's a legal complication with the content or the framing of the charges or the administration of the court-martial. He's overruled by the Army Council, and the sentences are authorised. Those executions, the sentence of death is authorised. Those executions happen here on the 29th of December 1922 at 10 minutes past 8 in the morning. The firing squad stand where Paul is. The guys are stood up against the wall over here, both of them together. And you'll see there's some perspex on the wall over there, because when we cleaned out this place in 2010, we found some bullets embedded in the wall. So if you walk over this way, you will notice, if you look in closely, there's a bullet there and there's a bullet in here. This bullet here is a little bit exposed because when we found them, lads start rooting at them as they did. So I had to put up the perspex, and the perspex has retained the area behind there where the bullets are embedded. So Murphy and Phelan dropped to the ground, and they're actually buried in here. In here, yeah.
Okay.
Until they're exhumed and repatriated to their families in 1924, approximately this time, 100 years ago. But what nobody knew was, after Crean, Parle and Hogan were executed in Wexford the following year, everybody thought they were buried in Wexford. They weren't. They were buried in here as well. So the night of their executions, their bodies were brought from Wexford to Kilkenny, buried here. So when the bodies were handed back in October 24, there were 5 bodies repatriated from Kilkenny Barracks, not 2. So
okay.
That's kind of the story. Unfortunately, you know, with the benefit of 100 and some odd years of you know, looking back, we can frame Ireland differently now. Those guys died for what they believed in. John Murphy had been a British Army soldier. He fought in World War One.
Okay.
He was awarded 2 medals for World War One service. He came home after being in the Army of Occupation in Germany, and immediately took off his army boots and put on a pair of IRA boots. That's the way I like to put it. And John Phelan was an extremely active person within the Kilkenny Tipperary IRA during the War of Independence. Both of them were in the Thomastown Battalion, the 5th Battalion of the IRA, and both of them stayed in the 5th Battalion during the Civil War.
Right,
So,
okay.
So they are two. Kind of, they were unremembered properly, right? But we did lectures here. We did make sure that we didn't make sure. We helped to have a headstone replaced on John Phelan's headstone, because his original headstone had disappeared over the years, and John Murphy is recorded on a family headstone out in the cemetery where they're in. There was an oration by the local TD, Skelly, is his surname, at the time, and some shots were fired later over their graves, but not at the funeral.
Okay, right.
They got the traditional 3 volleys by their comrades at some point later in the night after their bodies were interred out in Thomastown. That's their stories. This here is a small memorial which commemorates everybody that died, all the active combatants that died during the War of Independence and Civil War from Kilkenny. We're still working on the cap badge and stuff. And this cross here is our Congo cross, which commemorates all our Congo veterans alive and passed away for their exemplary service and in recognition of the standing down of the Congo mission this year, 60 years ago. This here is the 7 signatories of the proclamation. We put them onto. We took old slates off the officers' mess, which was paid by Queen Victoria or somebody before, from George III maybe or Ford, and we turned into symbols of our Irish national identity, paid for by the Crown about 200 years ago. So we should send a letter to them sometime. This is our Proclamation of Independence, which was put here bought for us and presented to us by Councillor Joe Malone, a former soldier. And we're very happy to have that here